O mighty armed Arjun, is difficult to attain without yoga. The sage who is earnest in yoga, the way of works, attains soon to the absolute. Shri Krishna talks about something very important in this verse. He says that although the path of works and renunciation are both the same, and they reach the same destination, one who tries to become a man of renunciation without performing works becomes sad, and it's very difficult. We must try to understand this verse properly. Imagine there's a very nice lake, and there's beautiful water in that lake that's sparkling, and a person feels good and becomes cool inside upon drinking it. There are two ways to reach this lake. The first is to travel 100 kilometers, and the second is to travel 10 kilometers. 100 kilometers, 10 kilometers. The road of 100 kilometers can be traveled on very easily and naturally, and many people have traveled on that road. There are steps, places to stay, hotels, trees where you can get rest in the shade for half an hour if you're tired, and brilliant securities as there's police cars everywhere. There are lights everywhere, and there's a properly made road. The road of 10 kilometers, on the other hand, requires you to climb hills, there are jungles. Leave the thought of roads, there are not even any paths, and you have to find your own way. There are wild and violent animals in the jungles, insects and scorpions, and it's a very unknown path. You will only get water in a small amount of places, and only if you spot these places, otherwise there is nothing to drink. You'll only be able to eat if you spot fruits and trees if they're edible, otherwise there's nothing to eat. Some travelers will only go for the 10-kilometer route because they like the challenge and like taking risks. However, what can you say about the majority of people? They will travel on the 100 kilometers routes, and it will not matter to them whether they're late because they'll be able to travel comfortably. They'll be able to make regular stops and stay somewhere at night time because all the facilities are there. In the same way, in order to reach the sparkling lake of Brahman, there are two paths. The way of works is like the 100 kilometers road. It may take a little while, but one can travel on it comfortably. One will be able to rest and stay in places for a while, for 2 or 3 nights. By 2 or 3 nights, I mean 2 or 3 lives. A person sleeps for 1 night, that is death, and then wakes up fresh in his next birth and travels further. Shri Krishna says in the Gita, Bahunam Janmanam Vante Gnanatva Mamanantane. Bahu means 3 in Sanskrit. There are 3 types of precepts in Sanskrit, which are Ekvachan, Dvaivachan, and Bahuvachan. In English, there's only 2 types of precepts, the singular and the plural. But in Sanskrit, there's Ekvachan, Dvaivachan, and Bahuvachan. In the same way, Shri Krishna's words say that there can be 3 lives to rest, and one will still reach the destination. On the other hand, if one slips from a mountain on the 10-kilometer path, then he will not be able to reach the destination. Shri Krishna says that a person who has not become steady in Karma Yoga can never become a person of the path of renunciation. Why? Because people think that a person on the path of renunciation has given up all actions. However, it is wrong to think that one becomes a person on the path of renunciation when he stops working on the outside. In the path of works, a person develops after becoming free from works, and slowly he becomes released from works. Imagine there is a thief who is committing burglaries. He gets caught and the police put him in jail. If the thief goes to jail, then has he completely given up stealing again? No, because the fact is that he will not steal as long as he is in jail, but that does not mean that he has completely renounced stealing. In the majority of occasions, the thief that is let out of jail after 6 months becomes an even better thief, because he meets other thieves in the prison and finds out why is it he's got caught and what mistakes he's made. He therefore doesn't make the same mistake again. He becomes trained and gets let out of jail. Guruji once read in the magazine that all the jails in the world are basically training centers where a bad criminal goes and comes out as a good criminal because there's many teachers in the jail for him. Discourses also happen in prisons as well. It may go away from the person's mind, and a thought may go away from a person's mind that he's a doer. Only then does he become a true person on a path of renunciation, and that is only possible on a path of works. This is because when a person performs works without desire, then thoughts of him as the doer automatically go away. There are two ways of works. The first is selfish work, and the second is desireless works, the topic of this class. Selfish works create great bondages for you. Shri Krishna describes desireless works as karma yoga. If a person lives with his wife with even a little bit of awareness, then he can turn selfish work into desireless works. One needs awareness for this. Great personalities say that the service in our ashrams was such that works reduced over time. In our Indian system, we divided society into four parts. We've also divided life into four parts, which is called the ashram system. The first stage was the brahmacharya ashram, where people become desireless and people got training in karma yoga. This was the first 25 years of their lives. In order to train themselves for the future, the concentration that this people put in studies got rid of the bad thoughts in the Tapovan, which was the Rishi's hermitage. Desirelessness used to come. For example, they had no desires to walk around wearing flashy clothes. They lived simple lives in their guru's hermitages. They knew that they could not think about the material world during their time there, and therefore they were desireless. In order to have good and noble thoughts, they would eat only the good and healthy foods in the guru's hermitage. Desirelessness came to them, and their wishes for material enjoyments went away by themselves. Then, at the ages of 25, they entered the stage of becoming householders, and they also acted without desires. They performed works to make the person who they were marrying happy. They sacrificed for their loved ones. During this stage of being a householder, they received very good training in how to renounce everything. Their children were born, and then both the husband and wife would give up all their interests. If they liked to travel around or to see movies, then when the child got born and the child got ill, then they would cancel the tickets even if they bought them. They would leave it to care for the child. This is a sacrifice of themselves which they developed through this training. This would even develop in their later lives. The rishis would tell them when they turned 50, to spend 6 months at home and 6 months in their travels. They told them to start leaving themselves and to begin forgetting the material world slowly and slowly. Jai Shri Krishna. Then they would renounce everything through this practice. They had practice of going through the path of karma yoga. At the beginning, they would leave for the hermitage, then they would leave for the families, their society and the country, as a lot of patriotism arose in people. Nowadays, people have lost their sense of nationalism because people have stopped taking the path of karma yoga. A few years ago, a woman asked Guruji why he doesn't talk about love towards one's country and patriotism during his Bhagavad discourses. This used to happen in the old days, but nowadays it doesn't happen anymore. If you look at it in terms of service, first people would serve themselves, then they would serve their spouse, their societies and dharma by using the money that they had accumulated in a good way. By service, I don't mean rice and flowers, but sitting down and serving people. This is what used to happen. After practicing this for many years, the person realizes he has worked enough and his feelings towards dharma keep increasing. At the beginning, he would serve the God so he would get something. Then he ask himself why he keeps on going to God to ask for things. His internal spiritual understanding of God increases and he develops strong feelings for God. He realizes that the meaning of God is not to be found outside but within himself. He then reaches the level of a man of renunciation. There are so many such possibilities, and even now it is possible for a person to travel on a path of karma yoga. After practicing renunciation for a while, a person reaches a state where Jay and I were talking about Ram Katha. Siya Ram me sab jag jani karo pranam chori jugapani. She sees God in every person in the world. This used to be possible. Shankaracharya ji says that a man of renunciation is sannyas tu paramarthika, meaning when one reduces the amount of time he spends living for himself and starts living for God. This is a true man of renunciation, and this can be achieved through the path of works. When we try to look at this from the perspective of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra or from the perspective of Hatha Yoga, then a person could also reach this state of a man of renunciation through performing works because he would keep the mind and the body healthy. A healthy mind stays in a healthy body. When a person has a healthy body, healthy mind, and is happy, then his mind or her mind would automatically turn towards God. There are many such paths in order to attain God. The path of Ashtang, shown in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra of Yam, Niyama, Satyam, Asama, Pranayam, Atya, Dharanya, Dharan, Samadhi, which we'll discuss in detail in chapter 6, could be travelled in order to reach the ultimate goal successfully by many people. The beginning of this is Yam Niyam, which is the path of works. A person can begin with this and ultimately reach the state of Samadhi. What is Samadhi? This divine bliss of having vision of God. If there are no karma yogis and there is no path of works, then a man of renunciation gets a lot of sorrows. Life becomes very difficult for her or him. The reason for this is that when one becomes released from works, then he or she also becomes released from the attitude that she is a performer of works. A person does not become a woman of renunciation by stopping actions. The doing in her must stop because the action, remember this, the action is not as important as the attitude in the mind of the person performing the action. We only call a person performing the action as a doer, and we always look at the attitude of the person performing the action. Guruji often uses the example that when a mother slaps a child and a neighbor slaps a child as well, then the action is the same and the child is also the same, but the attitude and feelings from the heart in the two performers of the actions is different. The slap from the mother does not make the child too sad, but the slap from the neighbor hurts the child a lot. The child knows that his mother is hitting him, but as well as giving him a slap, the mother also gives him sweets. From this, Guruji remembers the thoughts of a very famous thinker. There was a child of about 5 to 7 years of age. His mother died. His father remarried, and therefore a stepmother came into his house. After a year or two, the child became 8 to 9 years of age, and a person asked him what his stepmother was like. The person also asked the child whether he saw any differences between his mother and his stepmother. The child said yes, there was one difference. He said that his mother used to lie a lot, but his stepmother always tells the truth. The person asking the question found this very strange and asked him to explain why. The child said that whenever he would be naughty, then his mother would always tell him that she would not give him food to eat, and yet she would still give him food. She would lie. But when his stepmother would tell him that she wouldn't give him the food, then she would tell the truth, because she would really not give him any food. What I mean to say is that the very same action could be performed by two people, but both can have different attitudes. One only knows this from a feeling a person has in their heart. In the same way, the object is not important, but the feelings that a person has in his heart towards the object is most important. People with spiritual knowledge talk about this a lot. A person only performs works when the doer in her becomes active. If I ask you what a fan is, then you would obviously say that it is a fan. If I ask you what a fan does, then you will say that the fan blows air at you. A person with spiritual knowledge will say that this is the wrong answer. A fan does not give you air, only a moving fan gives you air. Over here, two different people have two different attitudes towards the same object. If you look at a book and ask what use the book has, then you may say that a book has knowledge, and therefore one gets knowledge from the book. It is not necessary to get knowledge from a book. It's true that you can get knowledge from the book, but only if a person reads it, thinks about it, and applies it to his life. But what if someone picks up a heavy book and starts hitting someone on the head with it? Has he attained knowledge? This book has remained the same, but for one person, it was like a teacher by giving that person knowledge, but for the same book was used to hit someone on the head, and that book doesn't remain a book, and it performs the work of a rock. The same goes for any person, because people are ultimately agents. Look what the attitude of the person performing works with, then you will understand what is going on. Karma Yoga is a whole training school. By traveling on it, a person's whole attitude becomes divine, and once his attitude becomes noble, then he will soon become liberated and will soon attain the Supreme Being. Shri Krishna uses the word tu, you see in this verse, tu, which is the second word on the first line, and great saints say that in order to achieve success in Samkhya Yoga, Karma Yoga is necessary, but the word tu, which means but, is used to show that Samkhya Yoga is not necessary in order to achieve success in Karma Yoga. So I repeat it again. Karma Yoga is necessary to achieve success in Samkhya, which is wisdom. There's a handout here. But Samkhya is not necessary to achieve success on the path of action. That is why the word do is used. For the powerful works, desireless action is a tool and renunciation is the final product. Verse 6. Look at this. The word yoga yukta is used, which is the first word on the third line. It means someone who is earnest on the way of works. When a person performs works as a routine, then his whole life becomes karma yoga. Shri Krishna also uses the word muni, the second word on the third line. What does muni mean? Who knows what muni means? Saint, yeah, exactly, a sage. That's a general meaning. More specifically, Shankaracharya defines muni as mananat muni, meaning a person that thinks. He's a sage. The specific definition is a person that thinks. What does he think about? Mananat ishvarupasya, meaning he thinks about the form of God. Such a person is a muni. In this verse, it is said that a person who thinks about two things in particular is a muni. The first is other people's welfare, and the second is his own selflessness. When performing works, a muni thinks about these two things, other people's welfare and his own selflessness. He thinks about whether what he does will lead to the good of others and also whether he's becoming more desireless by performing this action. A person who thinks like this with every step he takes is a true muni. When a person reaches a state and keeps receiving a yes answer to both these questions for every action he performs, then he or she attains Brahman. He becomes a complete karma yogi and reaches Brahman. A muni who is earnest in yoga attains the absolute very quickly. Verse 7.